So I think I feel for them there, and then I feel for their environment. Like being around the guys in the locker room um, is one of the greatest memories that we can have.
Sure.
And they're not having a lot of that.
Yeah.
And then I also feel for the college experience. Like for as much as we talk about paying players and all that, like there's still, I think, a huge discussion around the education. And I think a lot of education is about sitting in a room and hearing somebody from a different part of the world talk about why they went to college.
Welcome to the Elev8 podcast. This is episode 32. I am your host, Tyler Johnson. My guest this episode is a broadcaster. He had been broadcasting football and other sports for the last decade on the Pac12 networks, Fox, ESPN, Turner, SiriusXM, The Bleacher Report, and more. He is the own host of his amazing podcast, The Yogi Roth Show. How Great Is Ball, which is in season 5. We have that linked up here. Go check that out. He's a filmmaker, a speaker, a moderator, and author. He co-authored the New York Times bestseller Win Forever with head coach Pete Carroll of the Seattle Seahawks. He was also an assistant coach at USC. He's traveled to over 30 countries in the world. He has done about everything. He is a great guy. Check this episode out. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoy my conversations with Yogi. Welcome to the Elev8 podcast, Yogi Roth. How are you, Yogi?
I'll tell you what, man, I got to be blunt from jump. I love what you do. I consume your content. We've connected, years ago now, and watching it go from where you started, obviously it's been a journey that I don't know anything about, but I just am doing the social media thing. So congratulations. I want to start there with you, man, like kicking some you-know-what.
Trying, inspired by people like yourself. So appreciate the kind words. Also being blunt, you're probably tired because you have a new baby at home. Is that right as well?
Yeah, I haven't hit the crash yet. Like we're trying sleep training.
Okay, yeah.
So he's about seven weeks old today. And last night was the second night. And first night we were like, man, this is no problem. Cake, we're rolling. Last night, dude, changed it up on us. So but it's cool, man. It's really fun to be part of little changes like that. It makes you really be present. Like we think we are until you have a kid that like survives or like needs you to survive. You're like, oh, okay. Let's click into that mode.
Yeah, they will demand some things of you when they want them.
For real, yeah.
But
no negotiation.
Great little teachers they are. In your career, man, sports, travel, man, all those things are kind of out of whack right now. How are you dealing with all this? What does your fall look like? What's shaking in Yogi's world?
I didn't know. What's going on? They're out of whack?
A little off schedule.
Yeah. We are. We're dramatically off schedule. What's going on in my life? There's a lot going on in my life. And I think for me, I'm a process-oriented guy, so I have to process it, right? Like friends of mine would hopefully say Yogi doesn't get anger very often or upset very often. And I would say, well, when those things come, I just deal with them quickly. These have been harder to deal with, right? Yeah. Like the loss of a football season, the day it happened, I interviewed Commissioner Larry Scott. I'm in it, like prep the night before, the day of. It didn't hit me till like a week later that I was like, whoa, since I was 13 or 14, I've done football. And my body clock, my biorhythms changed, so I had to deal with that. Like, and it took me a couple days. And I told my wife, I was like, I'm depressed. Like, I'm bummed. And I get it. I support it. I double down on it. I think it's the right move, but it still doesn't change like that. It's been challenging. So life for me is that it's like meeting those challenges head on, not being afraid of them, feel that fear and try to work through it through communicating. So luckily I got 2 kids that, make it a lot lighter when anything kind of can seem a little gloomy.
Sure. Well, finding humanity and amazing stories within sports and around the world is kind of one of your fortes. Is there a story that,
within this kind of troubling time that you found some humanity and some positivity in?
Oh, yes, so many. I interviewed a woman named Scout Bassett,
Okay.
and I don't know if you know her, but check her out. And anyone listening, go check her out. I've had the pleasure over the course of the spring time here and summer to do this new series where I'm interviewing a bunch of people, and even amid COVID and super social distancing. But I sat down with Scout, broad brushstrokes of her story. When she was less than a year and a half, she was burned in a fire in China. She lost her leg. Her parents then put her on the doorstep of a state-run orphanage in China.
Wow.
She did not see sunlight. She did not see a book. She did not see a TV until she left that orphanage at 8 years old.
Wow.
She was treated as poorly as one might imagine. And so much so that, she didn't have the medical treatment she needed. So she built her own prosthetic out of nuts and bolts, masking tape, and a leather belt that she still has to this day. Fast forward, and what is she doing now? She's the fastest woman in America in the 100-meter dash for the Paralympic Games.
Holy cow.
And when I sat down with her and she told me her story in beautiful depth that would make anyone tear up, what she said in the middle of it really struck me. She goes, Yogi, I've learned that all we got is all we need. And I came home and told my wife that. I bring our 5-year-old sometimes to those shoots, the interviews. And it's just a reminder, like Pac12 Networks, we just laid off a furlough to more than half the company, I think.
Wow.
And I was impacted by that as well. So like you just remind yourself, like all you got is all you need. And that to me is a story that I've hung my hat on. I've told her that many times, and I think I'll carry that one for a long time. And I think a lot of people I tell it to will too, because some have said I've wrote it on my whiteboard.
I just wrote it down.
Yeah. So for her to say, all I got is all I need. She also, when she went for her Olympic dream, she quit her job where she was making bank or making good money in medical sales, had a company credit card, the whole thing. And she lived in her Toyota Corolla. And she said, I got to go for it. Right. So she didn't speak any English. She came to America at 8 years old at 22 pounds. No one ever said she could do anything. And then she found sport, she found movement and found play. And now she's inspiring people all over the globe.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I love all we got is all we need. I like that too. That'll get repassed on for sure. So a lot of power in those words. Your affinity for travel and sport, I know from being a college athlete, a lot of my teammates first experience getting on a plane and doing some traveling. Sports initiates so much of that for so many athletes. What is one of the lessons or a couple of the lessons that you take away from all your travels?
Oh, there's one. There's the biggest one to me is always, every trip I've ever been on, over 30 countries, I always go to see something, right? I want to go see the waves in San Sebastian, Spain. I want to see Christ the Redeemer in Rio. I want to see whatever. I want to see the Wailing Wall in Israel. And we all go to see something. And what we end up doing is we end up seeing ourselves in a different light. And I just believe that. That is, for me, the definition of travel. We go to see something, but we end up seeing ourselves in a different light, because traveling and walking these streets you don't know and trusting your instinct. And for me, talking to myself or talking in your journal, however it is you process change. And I think you take time to take stock in who you are. And I just think that's the serendipitous beauty of travel. And from that, I believe the only job in life that you have and that I have is to give everything away. So the only way to give anything away is to go gain it. So go travel, go seek, go explore, go uncover, go ask questions, go sit down and listen and learn and meditate, whatever it is, gain it all and then give it all. And I think if you don't travel, you can do some of it on social media. You can do some of it now because of the internet, but I think you got to put yourself in the environment. I just believe that you got to put your feet there. And it's been the greatest educator to me by far.
No doubt. Being a former college coach, you mentioned, the Pac-12 kind of situation. What do you find most disappointing or discouraging if you were a college athlete right now? What makes you, what saddens you for them, I guess, perhaps?
Yeah, that's well, the first thing that comes to mind for me is like the lack of unity among the power brokers. But I don't think that really impacts an athlete. That impacts me, and I think that impacts you if you're a little more seasoned. I think for them, it's probably they probably don't have a consistent amount of answers. Right? If I'm a football player and let's just say I play at Penn State, I
Sure.
could be Sean Clifford, who I love, by the way. And Pitt's playing, high school football's happening, but you're not playing. And that has nothing to do with you. That has to do with other schools in the Big Ten footprint. That has to do with medical advice that they've gotten. And then certain kids you just saw Jamie Newman, quarterback at Georgia, who I love, Wake Forest transfer. He just opted out because of COVID-19 to train for the draft. This year would have been a year, and they're playing, or he could have shown up for the draft. So the courage he had to have to say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable playing in this crazy conference, like they're insane. The whole thing about the SEC is bonkers to me.
Yeah.
And I say that very regularly. I think of guys like that. Like I just think the inconsistencies. You grow up in sports and the rules are the same. And no matter where you come from, when you step in between the white lines or onto the court or onto the pitch or onto the diamond, like the game's the same. And now I feel like in college, like there's so many other things happening. So I think I feel for them there, and then I feel for their environment. Like being around the guys in the locker room is one of the greatest memories, that we can have.
Sure.
And they're not having a lot of that.
Yeah.
And then I also feel for the college experience. Like for as much as we talk about paying players and all that, like there's still, I think, a huge discussion around the education. And I think a lot of education is about sitting in a room and hearing somebody from a different part of the world talk about why they went to college. Like I'll give you a story, and I know I'm rambling here.
No, okay.
I was in Berkeley two or three summers ago. It was Justin Wilcox's first season.
Okay.
And I went to Blue Bottle Coffee, which I always like hitting coffee shops.
Hold up. You're a big Cortado fan as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I was like, yeah.
Kevin Carroll loves that too. If you're looking for a comparison there, he was my guru.
All right. Yeah. We had him on the podcast not too long ago.
Oh, perfect. I love that.
Yeah, he was great. So, all right, go to the Berkeley coffee shop. Sorry.
So I'm in this Berkeley coffee shop, and I walk in, and I'm talking to this young woman, and I'm asking her how she's doing as a student. I'm just trying to gain insight on what college is like. And she goes, it's hard right now because I'm from, and I don't want to butcher the country, but she was from, I think, either China or Japan. And she goes, I can't register for the one class that I need because athletes get to register first. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to register. And if I don't, I'm going to have to pay for another semester.
Oh, yeah.
And I sat there and I was like, wow, do athletes realize how good they got it? So then I told Justin, and I think he ended up bringing her in to speak to his team. So guys recognize that, hey, like I get to go apply for my classes a week before regular students, and my school is paid for, and she's paying her own way. And when I just take it for granted, like that's a big miss. So I think that type of understanding from athletes, I think they're missing that in college now. It's all about them. It's all about their team and their coaches on Zoom like we are, but they're not getting what the educational experience provides, which is eye-opening to other cultures, other demos, where people are from, other stories, how to learn, tutors, teachers, classmates. So I feel for that. I do.
Yeah, me too. Something you tweeted recently I saw caught my eye, reminded me was blessed to have a professor in the business school in college that was also our NCAA liaison for like academics and athletics. So if you were an athlete in his class, he put the screws to you. But one of the things he made us do was people that had jobs or gigs that we thought we might desire, call them up, get them on the phone and interview them. And so you had tweeted recently something about, these athletes that might have time, scour your alumni list, figure out who those people are, get to know them, start to branch out. I thought it was awesome. I think it's great advice. Even you don't have to be in college to start doing those kind of things. Can you talk a little bit about why and maybe how you've seen the value being a former athlete, coach, in broadcasting now, the value of networking and kind of the power that athletes can leverage?
Well, think about it. you went to school. If anybody called you or emailed you, you'd hit them back instantly. They jump right to the top of the inbox, right? And I feel the same way. Pitt, SC, anybody in the Pac-12 hits me up, right to the top of the inbox. And I always remind athletes, and I do a lot of work with quarterbacks when their careers are over. They're like, what do I do next? And I was like, well, have you leveraged your community? And most haven't, because the craft, it's so much time, it's this, or they just don't care, didn't recognize it. And it's all BS. Like, there's time. You know, I brought this up with a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk a couple years ago. We did a talk to USC. And what he said was fascinating. He goes, yeah, Yogi, no longer do you have to get 3 business cards after practice. You can send 3 DMs. So if you want to talk to Casey Wasserman, who's running the Olympics in LA, you could send him a DM. He's going to know you as a UCLA football player, as an example. And you can go up and down the list at every institution. So I just think that the opportunity is easier than ever before. And it should be taken advantage of. And when I kicked that out, I got so much feedback that I said, you know what, I'm gonna have my own internship. And I usually have an apprenticeship every fall. I started with Max Brown a couple of years ago, former quarterback. And I bring in somebody, I teach them how to be a broadcaster, and they support me on my podcast and other things. Cool. And I'm going through all the applications now. And it's terrible, because every one I watch, I'm like, I'm going to hire you. I'm going to hire you. Like, they're so impressive, but they're doing it. And I just urge every athlete to try to do 12 of them this semester. Can you have 12 digital internships, 12 shadow ships and a cup of coffee? Like, can you create your network and take advantage of the game, or that the game's just going to take advantage of you, and you're going to be left kind of holding your helmet saying, hey, I wish I utilized the power of this logo.
Totally. I remember I did a couple extra for this project, and my friend was like, what are you doing? I'm like, this is fun. Like, and a couple of those things that even, you know, reciprocated years later, which was pretty cool. So, reach out there, find someone, get to know them. Great advice, Yogi. Ball is life. One of the things you say, we'll have the t-shirts linked up to this podcast as well. Go get yourself one. When it comes to leadership in ball is life, you've been around the game a lot. What are 3 qualities that make a great leader on and off the field?
Yeah, good question. I think I'm stealing one of them from Kobe. I listened to him on a podcast with Jay Shetty, and it was amazing, a storytelling podcast before he passed away. And he said when he was a younger teammate, he wasn't compassionate or empathetic. And it took him to the back half of his career to really be that way. So I think that's the first 2. I think you have to have great empathy, especially now. You know, we're seeing everyone get tested. Leadership position in your home, in your business, in the greater good of the country or the world. We're seeing leadership be blatantly terrible and it be brilliantly amazing. And I think it's those that have empathy are the ones that can begin the opportunity to lead well. I think coaches are doing a really good job of this, of trying to see, like, where are my kids coming from? What's their mental health like? You know, let me just try to put myself in their shoes for a second. How about their parents? Like, how nervous they are. Like, Larry Scott had a Zoom call with, like, I think 1,200 parents of Pac-12 athletes. Wow. Right? Think of what David Shaw, when he told his players the season was canceled, they said, thanks, coach. And he defined it as the amount of gratitude was surprising to him. Like, kids were so grateful. It's because he's empathetic. So that's one. I think 2 is you have to have a sense of compassionate, but principles. You know, you can't just be the softball that's just going to get rolled over, but you have to have compassion, understand where people come from. And that, to me, is all emotional intelligence, which would be loosely defined as the capacity to deal with your thoughts, the thoughts of others, with empathy in real time. Like, so I think you have to have those 2, but have principles associated with it. So guys can't get out of bounds, you know, or employees can't get out of bounds. You've got your guardrails, but you're compassionate and you're empathetic throughout it. And then I think the final one, and I believe this, I think now more than ever, you've got to listen. Like, look what's going on with racism in our country, right? And the anti-racist movement. Yeah. Right? One might be shocked, awed, angry if they see looting, defined as looting, right? And the minute you listen, you recognize, like, nobody, granted, this is a general statement, but it's not the traditional definition of looting to loot. It is, hey man, like, do you hear me? Do you hear me? And that's
Yeah.
what Coach Carroll said so brilliantly over the weekend when he had his press conference that I'm sure your listeners have watched, if not linked to it, where he's like, our athletes are saying, do you hear me? Our black athletes are saying, do you hear me? The black students I talked to in the Pac-12 are saying, do you hear me? And if you don't, like, I need to rattle some cages so you feel me.
Yeah.
So I think the greatest leaders, compassionate, empathetic, and they listen. And I think you need to listen like your life depends on it, because you can miss something that falls through the cracks.
Yeah.
And those that don't, and those that just talk, like we've got a leader in our country who just talks. And I got no problem saying that. And I know this isn't a political show, but it is the worst definition of leadership in the history of like the study on leadership, in my opinion, at least in this century. So I think you need those three things in this day and age, especially when so many people have a voice and a platform and an ability to utilize it.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna call an audible on a question here because you made me think of it, and then you led into it with Pete's recent conversation that he had during the press conference. Reading the book you guys wrote, I know Pete how much time he's spent in a varied amount of environments during recruiting, and I think listening, spending time around him. He's a great listener, but what are some other things that have made him, I think, be a timeless kind of coach and leader? And I think, or at least he evolves and he continues to lead. What makes him so special that way?
Oh, gee, I just think at the end of the day, what I always think about Pete is that his ability to listen is really special. I mean it, man. Like, it is really special. Like, you can get him for 10 seconds after practice, and you could feel like those are the only 10 seconds that matter. Or you can get him for an hour, and you feel this exact same thing. And you could be Steve Kerr, you could be somebody he's never met before, or anyone in between. He just makes you feel that way. I've never seen that consistently from anybody. Like, it's elite. He's elite as a communicator. Somebody told me that I was talking to an old teammate who this is going to sound like the craziest sentence. An old teammate was hanging out with President Obama, and he was like, when you're connected to him, like, it just feels different. Yeah. I think Pete has that. He's elevated in that regard. Because he has great empathy and compassion. And, think about some of the instances that have happened when he was a coach, the negative ones, right? Where Earl Thomas giving him the bird during a game. Pete was like, yeah, I get where he's coming from. Like, think about that. Like, the empathy you have to have in real
right.
time.
Yeah.
Name another NFL coach. Like, what would Nick Saban say? Or what would Bill Belichick say?
Right.
I don't know, but I can't imagine it being that.
Right.
So that's where I go. He's special there, and he hurt his players. And that was really impressive.
No doubt. Last question to wrap up. What drives you, Yogi? What drives you? You're a searcher of humanity, a traveler of the world. You make ball as life turn into so many lessons for so many others. What drives you? You talked about the gaining to give. Is that it? Yeah,
it's interesting. I was talking to former coach at Washington, Chris Peterson, and he's helping me a lot. Like, he's just a guy to talk to all the time. And, I'm always bouncing like, hey, this is like, I tweaked my philosophy a little bit, or this is kind of where my vision is for life. And I think as a dad of two now, what drives me is making sure that everything is connected. And I think for me, that's really important, because I am the ultimate, that looks awesome, I'm going to the left. And I never planned on going there. Yeah. That's been my life. I would define my life as a jack of all trades, probably. I think I'm a master at, like, college football, not because I put so much time into it. I've got mastery around it. But I've also often been defined as jack of all trades, master of none, because I'm not going to tweet about college football every day of the year for 365 days like maybe Kirk Herbstreit would. Like, I'm going to tell a story about a film. I'm going to talk about Scout Bassett. Like, that's where I lean. So what drives me is to tie it together. And that's where the phrase came together of my only goal is to seek and uncover humanity in sports around the globe. And I say that with my feet firmly on the ground, because that's what drives me. Like, I want to unearth stories that have never been told, and I want to take my kids with me. And I told this story. I'm telling a story about this guy named Leo Rogers, who's got he's got one leg, and he's got 8 paracycling gold medals. Right. So then he's riding a bike with no leg, and his leg is he lost it at the hip. Just imagine that for a second, right? And we went and filmed something with him a couple weeks ago, and I brought our 5-year-old. That's tying it together, you know, and that's what I'm constantly striving to do. Not easy. I don't think you probably get as much output when you're doing that. But Zane, as our 5-year-old, he could, if you asked him, hey, what makes a really good video? He'd say, every scene tells a story. You know, like he would be able to tell you like every frame has to do something because he's on my lap watching it at 7 a.m. I'm not flying through it like I normally would have if he wasn't there. So that's what drives me. Can I tie it all together? You know, and then, you know, I think I'm always struggling with the like, are you going for it like as big as you want? And I think that definition is so often impacted by what other people are doing. So I have to check in with that of like, okay, going for it doesn't mean like you're on game day. Like you want to be on game day, but you don't control that. Like you just control what you do on the platforms you have. I'm calling the Rose Bowl a career goal of mine, but I can't all of a sudden call it because ESPN owns it and I don't work there. Like I can just treat every game that I called for 20 years like the Rose Bowl. And that's what I do. So I think that I don't think I would have thought that a couple years ago.